This is what happened when 3 countries tried to eliminate cash, and why the world's most cashless nation is now telling its citizens to stockpile paper money at home. The number of American households with no bank account at all is 5.6 million, with another 19 million considered underbanked. If cash disappeared tomorrow, these families would find themselves locked out of the economy entirely. This is not just a hypothetical question anymore, because countries around the world are actively pushing toward cashless societies, and the results have turned out far more complicated than anyone predicted. 85% of point-of-sale transactions globally are already cashless as of 2024. Digital wallets processed nearly $14 trillion in 2023 alone, and mobile payment users grew to 1.9 billion people in 2023. The shift away from physical currency is accelerating faster than most people realize, which raises an uncomfortable question about what would actually happen if governments banned cash outright. We have real-world case studies to examine now, and the answers might surprise you. Sweden got closer than any other nation to making cash obsolete, which makes their recent reversal so striking. Back in 2010, 40% of Swedish transactions used cash. That number has collapsed to just 8 to 10% today. Cash in circulation dropped by half over 17 years. By 2016, 60% of bank branches had stopped handling physical currency entirely. The country's mobile payment app Swish became so dominant that more than 80% of the population now uses it regularly. Sweden became the model that cashless advocates pointed to as proof that eliminating physical currency could work, because it appeared efficient, modern, and forward-looking. And then something changed. November 2024 brought a government brochure to every Swedish household with a stark warning. The brochure was titled, "If Crisis or War Comes," and among its recommendations was advice to store enough cash for at least 1 week, preferably in different denominations. Erik Thedéen, the head of Sweden's central bank, has become one of the loudest voices warning against the very system his country pioneered. In 2024, he put it plainly: "We now need to think about resilience. If everything breaks down, we need to have cash." Later in 2024, Thedéen went even further, saying that people should always be able to pay for food, healthcare, and medicines both digitally and with cash, pointing to increased cyber attacks and major power outages in southern Europe as evidence. The Riksbank is now proposing legislation that would require supermarkets, pharmacies, health centers, and petrol stations to accept cash. The world's most cashless economy is deliberately stepping backward, and they are doing it for good reason. Sweden's reversal came from learning something the hard way. Digital payment systems break down when you need them most. A single software update from a company called CrowdStrike caused what many have called the largest IT outage in history in 2024, disrupting Visa, banks, and payment systems across the globe. June 2025 brought a nationwide power failure in Spain that knocked out all digital payments for approximately 10 hours. When the power goes out, when the internet fails, when servers crash, cash still works because it does not need electricity, a network connection, or permission from anyone. Hurricane Maria demonstrated this reality in devastating fashion. Puerto Rico experienced the longest blackout in American history after the storm hit in September 2017, lasting 328 days, with 100% of the island without power. Only 25% of automated teller machines remained operational during that period. Stores could open their doors, but processing card payments proved impossible. One resident described the situation simply: "We're without gasoline, without money, without food. This is a disaster. Cash became the only way to survive." System failures are not the only concern. There is also the question of what happens when governments decide to weaponize digital payment systems against their own citizens. The Canadian trucker convoy protests in February 2022 provided a glimpse of this possibility. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland announced that banks could freeze the accounts of protesters without court orders, and by February 19th, at least 76 bank accounts, totaling 3.2 million Canadian dollars, had been frozen. The total later reached 7.8 million Canadian dollars across more than 200 accounts. Some protesters and supporters turned to Bitcoin, citing its resistance to government control as their primary motivation. In January 2024, a federal court ruled that the government's use of the Emergencies Act was unlawful. The judge found that freezing accounts was unreasonable and ultra vires, that is, beyond the government's legal authority. But the accounts had already been frozen, the damage had already been done, and a precedent had been established about what becomes possible when all money exists in digital form. The American Civil Liberties Union has been raising these warnings for years. Senior policy analyst Jay Stanley put it this way: "The bottom line is that the technocratic dream of a cashless society is a vision in which we discard what is left of the anonymity that has characterized urban life since the dawn of modernity, and our freedom from the power of centralized companies like banks." Author Brett Scott offered an even more direct assessment, calling a cashless society a euphemism for a society in which people must ask their banks for permission to pay. Ignoring the legitimate arguments for reducing cash use would be unfair, because proponents do point to real benefits worth considering. Cash facilitates tax evasion on a massive scale. The United States tax gap, meaning the difference between taxes owed and taxes collected, reached $688 billion in 2021, the highest figure on record. Cash business income gets underreported at approximately 50%, compared to just 1% for wages with automatic withholding. Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff, author of The Curse of Cash in 2016, argues that large denomination bills make crime easier. His point was simple: $1 million in $100 notes fits into a briefcase. What he advocates for is a less cash society, not completely cashless, but with fewer large bills circulating. Evidence exists that reducing cash can reduce crime, with a Missouri study finding that crime dropped nearly 10% when cash welfare payments were replaced with electronic benefits. The pandemic also demonstrated how digital payment infrastructure allowed governments to distribute stimulus payments rapidly, something that would have proved far more difficult with physical checks alone. This is where the cashless vision runs into serious trouble, because it assumes everyone has equal access to digital systems when they clearly do not. Globally, 1.4 billion adults remain completely unbanked, with no bank account at all. The disparities within the United States are stark and revealing. Black households are unbanked at a rate of 10.6%, Hispanic households at 9.5%, while white households sit at just 1.9%. Women make up 55% of the world's unbanked population. Research in the United Kingdom suggests 47% of the population would face real challenges in a fully cashless society. Dame Meg Hillier, chair of the United Kingdom Treasury Committee, warned that the government is in the dark on how widely cash is being accepted, and that is completely unsustainable. We are at risk of a two-tier society where the most vulnerable bear the brunt. Swedish researchers documented homeless people living in isolated cash bubbles within the cashless society. These individuals can buy basic necessities, but paying for parking or bills without help proves impossible. An illicit market emerged where smartphone users charge homeless people extra to make digital payments on their behalf. One researcher observed that it is expensive to be digitally poor. There is an often overlooked dimension to this problem as well. Financial abuse occurs in 99% of domestic violence cases, and survivors frequently need cash for private transactions when escaping abusive situations, because digital payment trails can be monitored by their abusers. India's 2016 demonetization stands as the most dramatic example of what happens when governments force cashless adoption on an unprepared population. On November 8th at 8:15 p.m., Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a surprise televised announcement. The 501,000 rupee notes, which represented 86% of all currency in circulation, would cease to be legal tender at midnight, giving people just hours to prepare. The stated goals were combating black money, counterfeit currency, and terror financing, but what followed was chaos. By December, the median district had only 42% of pre-demonetization currency available. One research organization reported 1.5 million jobs lost between January and April 2017, and GDP growth slowed from 8% to 6.7%. And here is the statistic that undermined the entire premise. 99.3% of the demonetized currency returned to banks. The illicit cash that was supposed to be extinguished mostly came back into the system anyway. Nobel laureate Amartya Sen called it a despotic action. Nigeria attempted something similar in late 2022 and early 2023, imposing strict cash withdrawal limits and redesigning banknotes with tight deadlines. And the result was chaos on a national scale. Automated teller machines emptied across the country, businesses shut down, and violent protests erupted in multiple cities. Trade, agriculture, and rural areas were described as practically crippled. Nigeria's Supreme Court later ruled the withdrawal limits illegal and a violation of citizens' rights. The trajectory remains clear despite these cautionary tales, because digital payments will continue growing. 137 countries representing 98% of global GDP are now exploring central bank digital currencies, with 49 pilot projects underway worldwide. But a counter-movement has also emerged. 8 U.S. states have passed laws requiring businesses to accept cash, and cities including Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco, and Detroit have similar requirements. January 2025 brought an executive order from President Trump explicitly banning development of a U.S. central bank digital currency, citing concerns about financial system stability, individual privacy, and sovereignty. Representative Warren Davidson summarized the pro-cash position clearly. He said, "Cash is security. Cash works even if the electric grid goes down. When disaster hits, cash isn't just handy, it's a lifeline. America should never become a cashless society." The evidence from Sweden, India, Nigeria, and others tells us something we need to understand. The question isn't whether digital payments are convenient, because they obviously are. The real question is whether we're willing to accept the trade-offs, vulnerability to system failures, potential for government overreach, and exclusion of millions who can't access digital banking. A paradox emerges from the data that's worth paying attention to. Despite the massive shift toward digital payments, cash in circulation is actually still growing in most countries. The US has over $2.3 trillion in physical currency circulating, and that number increased by $43 billion just between June 2024 and June 2025. People are using cash less for everyday transactions, but they're holding on to more of it just in case. Sweden showed us how far cashless could go, and now Sweden is showing us something else entirely. The value of having a backup plan is clear. Their government is telling citizens to keep cash at home, and their central bank is proposing laws to guarantee cash acceptance. The future probably isn't cashless. Kenneth Rogoff's vision of less cash seems more likely, a world where digital dominates but physical currency remains available for those who need it, want it, or find themselves in situations where nothing else works. When the power goes out, when the servers crash, when the hurricane hits, paper money doesn't need a password.